Frank Beard, the man with no beard. I think that it probably rivals some marriages. We're constantly asked what might be the secret behind the scenes. The answer is quite simple.
On August 17th, 2026, a phone call reached Billy Gibbons that he had quietly been dreading for years. Frank Beard, the drummer who powered ZZ Top's rhythm section since a Houston jam session back in 1969, had died at his ranch in Richmond, Texas, surrounded by family. For the first time in the band's 56-year history, Gibbons now stood alone as the only original member still standing. So what did he say when that moment arrived? And how did a band built on decades of quiet partnership choose to carry on without him? Stick around. His answer surprised everyone. The night everything changed for ZZ Top. Some deaths in music arrive as a shock. This one arrived as the slow, painful conclusion of something fans had been watching unfold for months. Frank Beard had already stepped away from ZZ Top's ongoing Big One tour in early August, handing his drum stool to fill-in player Michael Monaghan while he dealt with health issues the band never publicly named. Then, on Monday, August 17th, he passed away in hospice care at his Texas ranch, with relatives close by. He was 77 years old. The band's longtime publicist, Bob Merlis, confirmed the news the following day, and within hours, a statement from Gibbons himself began circulating across every platform that still cares about rock and roll. It read as one of the more restrained tributes a surviving bandmate has ever issued, and that restraint is exactly what made it hit so hard. Gibbons wrote that he and bassist Elwood Francis had lost a great friend and collaborator, and that the world had lost one of the most naturally innovative drummers it had ever known. A description fans quickly noted was not exaggeration, but plain fact. No official cause of death was disclosed by the family or the band's representatives, and the Fort Bend County Medical Examiner's Office likewise declined to release additional details in the days immediately following his passing. That silence around the cause did nothing to slow the outpouring of grief, and it arguably deepened it, since fans were left mourning a musician whose final months had clearly been difficult without ever knowing the full picture. Beyond the music world, longtime fans in Texas took the loss personally, describing Beard as a hometown hero whose steady presence on stage had soundtracked family road trips, backyard barbecues, and decades of Friday night radio for entire generations. That local pride matters here, since Beard rarely sought the spotlight for himself, letting his hometown state claim him as one of its own, rather than chasing celebrity beyond the music itself. Word of the loss spread fast enough that ZZ Top canceled 2 shows almost immediately, a Tuesday night stop in Salt Lake City and a Wednesday date in Colorado Springs, giving the band and crew a moment to breathe before deciding what came next. B-Times UK laid out how the band paired that tribute with an immediate promise to keep touring in Beard's honor once those 2 shows had passed. That decision alone told fans something about how Gibbons was choosing to grieve. Rather than retreating from the road, he treated the stage as the place where Beard's memory actually belonged. Fellow musicians across rock, including members of Guns N' Roses and Rage Against the Machine, posted their own tributes within days, turning social media into something closer to a wake than a news cycle. Even outlets that mostly cover breaking news paused to note the strange symmetry of it all. A band famous for Beard's losing the one member who never grew one. ABC News captured that irony directly while covering the wave of tributes that followed his death. None of that answers the bigger question fans actually wanted resolved, though. A tribute statement is one thing, but actually watching Billy Gibbons walk back onto a stage days after losing his last original bandmate is another thing entirely, and that is precisely where this story gets complicated. Before we get to what happened when the lights came back up, you need to understand who Frank Beard was in the first place, because the way Gibbons chose to honor him only makes sense once you know the man being honored. 60 years in the pocket. Who Frank Beard really was. Frank Lee Beard was born on June 11, 1949, in the small town of Frankston, Texas, though he was raised roughly 100 miles away in Irving, where he attended Irving High School and grew up steeped in a working-class world of blues records, hot rods, and border radio rhythm and blues. Long before ZZ Top existed, Beard was already grinding through the Texas club circuit with bands called the Cellar Dwellers, the Hustlers, and the Warlocks, developing the same musical lineage that eventually shaped the entire ZZ Top sound. Beard often described himself, with a mix of pride and dry humor, as a seventh-generation Texan, tracing his family's arrival in the state back to 1836 and recalling a grandmother who walked behind a covered wagon from Louisiana in 1899. That deep sense of place shaped the blues and rockabilly foundation he brought into every session. Long before anyone outside a handful of Dallas barrooms had heard his name, it was Beard who effectively built the band's classic lineup. In late 1969, guitarist Billy Gibbons was searching for a rhythm section for his group, and Beard suggested Gibbons audition his old bandmate Dusty Hill, a bassist he had already played alongside in a Dallas outfit called American Blues. The three met at Gibbons's Houston home, jammed for hours, and never really stopped. Beard officially joined what would soon be renamed Z-Top in mid-1969, and the trio released ZZ Top's first album on London Records in January 1971, launching a run that would eventually span 15 studio records. His Wikipedia biography traces that entire early history in detail, including a brief and unauthorized stint touring as part of a fake lineup of the Zombies before ZZ Top ever existed. That early nickname stuck partly as a joke among bandmates who found it funny that the group's least hirsute member carried a surname built for a beard. Musically, though, there was nothing funny about what he brought to the trio. Fellow musicians and critics alike often pointed to his hard shuffling, slightly behind-the-beat feel as the secret ingredient that let Gibbons's guitar and Hill's bass lock into the loose, swaggering groove that became ZZ Top's signature. Behind the steady grooves that anchored songs like Tush Legs and Sharp-Dressed Man, Beard was fighting battles the public rarely saw play out in real time. In the band's 2019 documentary, That Little Old Band from Texas, he spoke with unusual candor about a heroin and cocaine addiction that consumed much of his 1970s paycheck, admitting he spent an entire $72,000 payment on substances and eventually sold his own drum kit to keep the habit going. He described entering a 30-day treatment program after realizing he had done it all and could not go any further. Ultimate Classic Rock's reporting captured that confession at length, including bandmate Dusty Hill's own emotional account of watching a friend nearly destroy himself. Beard got sober during the band's extended hiatus in the early 1980s and returned changed, both personally and musically, helping drive ZZ Top's unlikely reinvention as an MTV-era hit machine later that decade. He married Debbie Meredith in 1982, and the couple had twin sons, Rory and Nico, in 1985. Offstage, longtime observers described him as the quiet, self-contained member of the trio, often locked into his own private rhythmic world behind a chrome-plated custom kit, while Gibbons and Hill worked the crowd out front. Louder Sound painted that exact portrait in its retrospective, describing Beard as ZZ Top's human metronome even during his darkest years. Even after achieving sobriety, Beard remained famously private about his inner life, rarely granting lengthy interviews and preferring to let his playing speak for itself night after night, across 5 decades of nearly non-stop touring. Bandmates and crew members frequently described him as the most disciplined member of the trio once he got clean, arriving early, rehearsing quietly, and treating the drum kit less like a stage prop and more like a piece of precision machinery that demanded respect. That contrast, the flashy frontmen and the quiet engine room keeping perfect time behind them, is part of why Beard's death landed so differently than a typical rock star tribute. He was never the face of Z-Top, yet everything the band built rested on the pocket he created night after night for decades. Understanding that is what makes Gibbons's next move, the decision to speak publicly and then walk straight back onto a stage, feel less like showbiz and more like a promise being kept. Billy Gibbons steps forward. Grief, humor, and a promise to keep going. Grief looks different on everyone, and Billy Gibbons chose to process his in a way that felt entirely consistent with the man Frank Beard actually was: blunt, understated, and quietly funny, even in sorrow. In the official statement issued through the band's publicist, Gibbons did not lean on sweeping declarations. He simply said the band Beard had been part of for 6 decades was going to keep on keeping on, exactly as Beard had wished. That single line carried enormous weight because it confirmed almost immediately what fans feared they might not get an answer to for weeks, whether ZZ Top would continue at all. Gibbons followed up with a lighter, more personal memory in a separate interview, joking that Beard never minded being the beardless one in a band famous for facial hair, since it meant he could walk through a shopping mall without anyone stopping him. Guitar Player collected that exact recollection alongside several other stories Gibbons shared about his late bandmate in the days following his death. Gibbons has told a similar story for years about how the band's famous facial hair came about in the first place, admitting in a separate interview that the whole look began almost by accident. He explained that the band had simply gotten lazy on the road and nobody had bothered to shave, and that in the simplest possible terms, that was exactly how the now iconic beards started. Frank, notably, never joined in, a detail that made his surname a running joke inside the band for decades. Gibbons has often reflected on just how unlikely it was that the three of them stayed together for so long in the first place. Asked years earlier about the secret behind the band's remarkable longevity, he joked that the real answer came down to 2 simple words: separate buses, a line that captured both the affection and the practical distance that kept the trio functional across 5 decades of close-quarters touring. That same blend of humor and honesty defined how he chose to speak about Beard's passing as well. Then came the moment everyone was actually watching for. Only 5 days after Beard's death, ZZ Top walked back onto a stage in Austin, Texas, resuming the Big One tour rather than pausing it indefinitely. Gibbons addressed the loss just once, briefly, during the band introductions after the opening song, telling the crowd plainly that they were all there for a celebration and that everyone should have a good time. He then recalled a conversation with Beard near the end in which Beard acknowledged his weakened bass drum foot and asked for Monahan to step in, joking afterward that Monahan doing well was exactly what worried him. A detailed account of that Austin performance described the blend of tenderness and dark humor that defined the band's emotional return to the stage. The set that followed included longtime staples like Waitin' for the Bus, Jesus Just Left Chicago, Gimme All Your Lovin', Cheap Sunglasses, Sharp-Dressed Man, and Legs, closing with the encore fans have come to expect from a band that has never treated its catalog as anything but sacred. Nothing about the performance suggested a band limping through obligation. If anything, it looked like exactly what Gibbons had promised. A celebration rather than a funeral, played out in front of thousands of people who had shown up not knowing quite what to expect. So Gibbons broke his silence, but not with a lengthy eulogy or a tearful press conference. He broke it with a joke about a bass drum pedal, a promise to keep the band moving, and a full concert played less than a week after burying his oldest musical partner. That decision raises an obvious question fans have been asking ever since, though, which is what actually happens to ZZ Top now that Gibbons truly is the last man standing from the original lineup. What comes next for ZZ Top? The most immediate answer is simple: the band keeps touring. The Big One tour resumed in Eagle Pass, Texas on August 21st, just 4 days after Beard's death, with Michael Monahan continuing behind the kit, a role he had already filled temporarily during a 2025 health-related absence before stepping in full-time this August. The North American leg is scheduled to run through October, after which Gibbons, Francis, and likely Monahan are expected to travel to South America for a handful of additional dates in November. Rolling Stone confirmed those upcoming plans while reporting on the band's emotional first show since Beard's passing. Elwood Francis, for his part, has become something of a living bridge between ZZ Top's past and its present. He spent years working as the band's guitar technician before stepping in on bass following Dusty Hill's death, and he reportedly grew his own beard specifically as a tribute to the bandmate he replaced. That gesture, small as it may seem, reflects the same philosophy Gibbons appears to be applying now, honoring the man who is gone by carrying his spirit forward rather than trying to replace what cannot truly be replaced. That continuity matters more than it might first appear. ZZ Top has already survived one devastating loss when bassist Dusty Hill died in his sleep in July 2021 at age 72, prompting longtime guitar tech Elwood Francis to step in as his permanent replacement at Hill's own request. The band's ability to absorb that loss without disbanding set the template for how it is handling Beard's death now, treating replacement not as betrayal, but as respect for a bandmate's clearly stated wishes. ZZ Top's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 2004 already cemented its place in music history, and Gibbons appears determined to make sure that legacy keeps extending forward rather than freezing in place. What makes this particular moment different from Hill's death, though, is the symbolism of Gibbons now being the sole surviving founder. For 56 years, three men built a sound so specific that entire genres of Texas blues rock trace back to their partnership. Now only one remains from that original trio, carrying forward a catalog that includes La Grange, Tush, Sharp-Dressed Man, Gimme All Your Lovin', and Legs. Songs that Beard's hard shuffling, slightly behind the beat drumming, helped define as much as any guitar riff or vocal line ever did. Looking back across Beard's full career, what stands out is not simply the number of records or the length of the tours, but the consistency of his contribution. He anchored 15 studio albums, beginning with 1971's ZZ Top's first album through 2012's La Futura, appearing on every single one, a streak of reliability that few drummers in rock history can claim. That kind of consistency rarely makes headlines on its own, yet it is exactly the foundation that allowed ZZ Top's more flamboyant elements, the guitars, the sunglasses, the choreography, to work as well as they did for as long as they did. It is also worth remembering just how rare Beard's kind of longevity is in an industry known for lineup changes, breakups, and bitter legal fights over royalties. ZZ Top never experienced a single lineup change across its classic era, a stability almost unheard of among bands that formed in the late 1960s and continued performing arena tours into the 2020s. That stability was not an accident. It was the direct result of three men who genuinely respected one another's space, on stage and off. And Beard's steady, understated presence was as much a part of that chemistry as anything Gibbons or Hill ever did out front. There is also something worth sitting with in how Gibbons chose to frame all of this publicly. He did not treat Beard's death as an ending to be mourned indefinitely, nor did he pretend the loss was small. He simply kept doing the thing Beard would have wanted most, playing the songs, keeping the tour moving, and trusting that the music itself was always the real tribute. Frank Beard spent nearly 6 decades proving that the quietest member of a band can still be its most essential engine, and Billy Gibbons, in breaking his silence the way he did, made sure that lesson would not be forgotten the moment the cameras looked away. So while the headlines focused on grief, the truth is a little more complicated and a lot more hopeful. ZZ Top did not stop when Frank Beard's heart did. It kept its rhythm, found a new hand to hold the sticks, and walked straight back into the pocket he spent his whole life building. That, more than any single statement, may be the clearest thing Billy Gibbons has said since losing him. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.